Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Om Apavitra Pavitrova Sarva Avastangatopi Va Yat Smaret Pundarika Akshang Sabhakya Abhyantara Suchihi Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu Om Ajnana Timarandasya Jnana Anjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangang Lang Hayate Giring Yat Kripatamahang Vande Sri Gurun Dinataranam Yat Kripatamahang Vande Parama Ananda Madhavam Trinadapi Sunichena Taradeva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Harinama 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 Eva Kevalam Kalau Nastyeva 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 Gatir Anyata Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Tatra Kirtayato Vipra Viprarsher Bhuri Tejasa Ahang Chad Yagamang Tatra Nivishtashtad Anugrahat Sohang Va Shravayishyami Yatha Ditang Yata Mati. Sutta Goswami told the sages of Naimisharanya as follows. O learned Brahmanas, when Shukadeva Goswami recited Srimad Bhagavatam in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. So now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I have learned it from him and as I have realized it. So the reason why I included this now is because in the same way, Sutta explains that because he heard from Shukadev, he's going to explain the very same thing, and he's also going to explain as far as his realization is concerned. So in the same way, when I do these classes, I present to you what I have learned from Srila Prabhupada, and I make comments as far as I have realized it. May Krishna bless you and protect all of you. Hari Hari Bol. So last week, we studied 3 episodes. First was Agra Puja, who was to be worshipped first in terms of the Rajasuya sacrifice. And it was stated by one of the Pandavas, Sahadev. He said, in my opinion, the best person to be worshipped is Krishna. Now he said that even though there were many exalted sages and rishis and demigods, we all heard that Brahma was there, Shiva was there, Indra, but Sahadev spoke very convincingly that in his opinion, and he said, I don't think any of you would disagree, that the best person, the first person to be worshipped is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And practically everyone in the assembly agreed. But then one person, he spoke up, Shishupal. And Shishupal blasphemed Krishna in so many ways. And there was about to be a bloody battle right there at the Rajasuya sacrifice. So Krishna did not want to spoil Yudhishthira's Rajasuya sacrifice. He did not want there to be a big fight. So Krishna himself, with his Sudarshana Chakra, decapitated Shishupal. And we heard last week that Krishna did it in such a way that not even one drop of blood was spilled. That is the greatness of Krishna. And everyone saw the Atma, the spirit soul of Shishupal, like a meteor, come out of his body and enter the body of Krishna. And then that spirit soul, having lived 3 lives as demons, that became one either Jai or Vijay. He was reinstated in the Vaikuntha Loka, having been cursed by the 4 Kumaras. So there were 3 births of Jai and Vijay. First, there was Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, then Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and then Shishupal and Dantavakra. We will hear about Dantavakra later on in a few weeks. So everyone saw how Shishupal merged into the body of Krishna. So now this episode is entitled Aftermath and Purport. After the salvation of Shishupal, King Yudhishthira rewarded all the members present in the sacrificial assembly. Yudhishthira sufficiently remunerated the priests and learned sages for their engagement in the execution of the sacrifice. And after performing all this routine work, Yudhishthira took bath. This bath at the end of a sacrifice is also technical. It is called Avabrita Snan. Lord Krishna thus enabled the performance of the Rajasuya Yajna, arranged by King Yudhishthira, to be successfully completed. And being requested by his cousins and relatives, Krishna remained in Hastinapur for a few months more. Although King Yudhishthira and his brothers were unwilling to have Lord Krishna leave Hastinapur, eventually Krishna arranged to take permission from King Yudhishthira to return to Dwaraka. And thus Krishna returned home along with his queens and ministers. The story of the fall of Jai and Vijay from the Vaikuntha planets to the material world is described in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The killing of Shishupal has a direct link with that narration of Jai and Vijay. But the most important instruction we get from this incident is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being absolute, can give salvation to everyone, whether one acts as his enemy or as his friend. It is therefore a misconception that Krishna acts with someone in relationship of friend and with someone else in the relationship of enemy, indiscriminately or whimsically. Krishna's being an enemy or friend is always on the absolute platform. There is no material distinction. This is because Krishna is impartial. Krishna simply responds to the free will of the living entity. Some want to relate to Krishna as enemy, and some want to relate to Krishna as friend. Krishna does not interfere with the living entity's free will at any time. This is the conclusion of one of Krishna's final statements in Bhagavad Gita. Atechasi tata kuru. My dear Arjuna, as you like, you may act. And this indicates that God does not interfere with the little independence of the living entity. After King Yudhisthira took bath at the conclusion of the sacrifice and stood in the midst of all the learned sages and brahmanas, Yudhisthira seemed exactly like the king of heaven, Indradev, and thus Yudhisthira looked very beautiful. King Yudhisthira sufficiently rewarded all the demigods who participated in the yajna, and being greatly satisfied, all of them left, praising the king's activities and glorifying Lord Krishna. So I'd like to make a comment here. This is very surprising. Usually people go to the demigods to get benedictions. But here we see Yudhisthira apparently is greater than the demigods because he is rewarding them. This shows how great Krishna's devotees are. When Shukadeva Goswami narrated these incidents of Krishna's killing Shishupal and described the successful execution of the Rajasuya Yajna by Maharaj Yudhisthira, Shukadeva also pointed out that after the successful termination of the yajna, only one person was unhappy. That distinction was reserved for Duryodhana, for by nature Duryodhana was envious because of Duryodhana's sinful life. Duryodhana appeared in the dynasty of the Kurus just like a chronic disease personified, just to destroy the whole Kuru family. And this will be revealed in an upcoming episode. However, Shukadeva Goswami assured Maharaj Parikshit that the pastimes of Lord Krishna, such as the killing of Shishupal and Jarasandha, and the releasing of the imprisoned kings, are all transcendental vibrations, and anyone who hears these narrations from authorized persons, like Srila Prabhupada, will immediately be freed from all the reactions of the sinful activities of his or her life. So this is the benefit of attending this class week after week after week. You are getting freed from sinful reactions simply by attending this class. So for no other reason but selfishness, you should attend this class so that you become free from sinful reactions. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. King Yudhisthira was known as Ajatashatru, or a person who had no enemy. Therefore, when all the men, demigods, kings, sages, and saints saw the successful termination of the Rajasuya Yajna performed by King Yudhisthira, they were very happy. That Duryodhana alone was unhappy was astonishing to Maharaj Parikshit, and therefore he requested Shukadeva Goswami to explain this. Shukadeva Goswami then said, "My dear King Parikshit, your grandfather Yudhishthir was a great soul. His congenial disposition attracted everyone to be his friend, and therefore he was known as Ajatashatru, or one who never created an enemy. He engaged all the members of the Kuru dynasty in taking charge of the different departments for the management of the Rajasuya sacrifice. For example, Bhimasen was put in charge of the kitchen department, Duryodhana in charge of the treasury department, Sahadev in charge of the reception department, Nakula in charge of the store department, and Arjuna in charge of looking after the comforts of the elderly persons. But the most astonishing feature was that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took charge of washing the feet of all the incoming guests. Whenever I read this, whenever I am reminded of this, this makes me love Krishna more and more. Krishna is God. Nobody is equal to or greater than Krishna. But Krishna can be so humble that he washed all the feet of the guests. This is yet another reason, one of millions of reasons, why I love and serve Krishna. The queen, the goddess of fortune Draupadi, was in charge of administering the distribution of food. And because Karna was famous for giving charity, Karna was put in charge of the charity department. In this way, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Santardana, and Burishwabha, who was the son of Balika, were all engaged in different departments for managing the affairs of the Rajasuya sacrifice. They were all so bound in loving affection for King Yudhishthir that they simply wanted to please him. King Yudhishthir did not force his relatives to accept different tasks at this sacrifice. Rather, out of love for Yudhishthir, they all volunteered for such duties. After the death of Shishupal, by the mercy of Lord Krishna, and he merged into spiritual existence, and after the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice, when all the friends, guests, and well-wishers had been sufficiently honored and rewarded, King Yudhishthir went to bathe in the Ganges. The city of Hastinapur stands today on the bank of the Yamuna. And so the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam that King Yudhishthir went to bathe in the Ganges indicates, therefore, that during the time of the Pandavas, the river Yamuna was also known as the Ganges. While the king was taking the Avabrita Snan, different musical instruments vibrated, such as mridangas, conchels, drums, kettle drums, and bugles, and the ankle bells of the dancing girls jingled. Many groups of professional singers played veenas, flutes, gongs, and cymbals, and thus a tumultuous sound vibrated in the sky. The princely guests from many kingdoms like Srinjai, Kamboj, Kuru, Kekai, and Koshala were present with their different flags and gorgeously decorated elephants, chariots, horses, and soldiers. All of them passed in a procession with King Yudhisthira in the forefront. The executive members who had performed the sacrifice, such as the priests, religious ministers, and brahmanas, all loudly chanted the Vedic hymns. The demigods and inhabitants of Pitriloka and Gandharvaloka, as well as many sages, showered flowers from the sky. The men and women of Hastinapur, or Indraprastha, their bodies smeared with scents and floral oils, were nicely dressed in colorful garments and decorated with garlands, jewels, and ornaments. Enjoying the ceremony, they threw on each other liquid substances like water, oil, milk, butter, and yogurt. Some even smeared these on each other's bodies. In this way, they enjoyed the occasion. The professional prostitutes jubilantly smeared these liquid substances on the bodies of the men, and the men reciprocated in the same way. All the liquid substances had been mixed with turmeric and saffron, and their color was a lustrous yellow. In order to observe the great ceremony, many wives of the demigods had come in different airplanes, and they were visible in the sky. Similarly, the queens of the royal family, gorgeously decorated and surrounded by bodyguards, arrived on different palanquins. During this time, Lord Krishna, the maternal cousin of the Pandavas, and Krishna's special friend Arjuna were both throwing liquid substances on the bodies of the queens. The queens then became bashful, but at the same time, their beautiful smiling brightened their faces. Because of the liquids thrown on their bodies, the saris covering them became completely wet. The different parts of their beautiful bodies, particularly their breasts and waist, became partially visible because of the wet cloth. The queens brought buckets of the same liquid substances and with syringes sprinkled them on the bodies of their brothers-in-law. And as they engaged in such jubilant activities, their hair fell loose, and the flowers decorating their bodies began to fall. When Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and the queens were thus engaged in these jubilant activities, persons who were not clean in heart were agitated by lusty desires. In other words, such behavior between pure males and pure females is enjoyable, but it makes persons who are materially contaminated become lustful. When King Yudhisthira, in a gorgeous chariot yoked by excellent horses, was present there along with his queens, including Draupadi, their features were so beautiful that it appeared as if the great Rajasuya sacrifice were standing there in person, along with the different functions of the sacrifice. Following the Rajasuya sacrifice, there was the Vedic ritualistic duty known as Patni Sangyaja. This sacrifice, which is performed along with one's wife, was also duly performed by the priests of King Yudhisthira. When Queen Draupadi and King Yudhisthira were taking the Avabhrita Snan, the citizens of Hastinapur, as well as the demigods, began beating on drums and blowing trumpets out of feelings of happiness, and there was a shower of flowers from the sky. When the king and queen finished their bathing in the Ganges, all the other citizens, consisting of all the Varnas or castes, namely the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudra, also took their baths in the Ganges. Bathing in the Ganges is recommended in the Vedic literature because by such bathing, one is freed from all sinful reactions. This is still current in India, especially at particularly auspicious moments. At such times, millions of people bathe in the Ganges. After taking bath, King Yudhishthira, dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapper, and decorating himself with valuable jewelry, the king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and the others who had participated in the sacrifice. In this way, Yudhishthira worshipped them all. Yudhishthira constantly worshipped his friends, family members, relatives, well-wishers, and everyone present. And because Yudhishthira was Vaishnava, or a great devotee of Lord Narayan, Yudhishthira knew how to treat everyone well. The Mayavadi philosophers' endeavor to see everyone as God is an artificial way towards oneness. But the Vaishnava, or devotee of Lord Narayan, sees every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the Vaishnava's treatment of other living entities is on the absolute platform. Just as one cannot treat one part of one's body differently from another part because they all belong to the same body, the Vaishnava does not see a human being as distinct from an animal. This is because in both of them, the Vaishnava sees the soul and supersoul seated simultaneously. When everyone was refreshed after bathing and was dressed in silken clothing with jeweled earrings, flower garlands, turbans, long wrappers, and pearl necklaces, all together they looked like the demigods from heaven. And this was especially true of the women, who were very nicely dressed. Each wore a golden belt around the waist. They were all smiling with spots of tilak and curling hair scattered here and there. This combination was very attractive. Those persons who had participated in the Rajasuya sacrifice, including the most cultured priests, Brahmanas who had assisted, the citizens of all the Varnas, and the kings, demigods, sages, saints, and citizens of Pitriloka, were all very much satisfied by the dealings of King Yudhishthira, and at the end they happily departed for their residences. While returning to their homes, they talked of the dealings of King Yudhishthira, and even after continuous talk of Yudhishthira's greatness, they were not satiated, just as one may drink nectar over and over again and never be satisfied. After the departure of all the others, Yudhishthira restrained the inner circle of his friends, including Lord Krishna. Still, Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of King Yudhishthira. Krishna therefore sent back all the heroes of the Yadu dynasty, like Samba and others. All of them returned to Dwarka, and Lord Krishna personally remained just to give pleasure to King Yudhishthira. Lord Krishna is described here as Yudhishthira's special eye, since Krishna advised the king on what was beneficial and what was not. In the material world, everyone has a particular type of desire to be fulfilled, but one is never really able to fulfill one's desire to one's full satisfaction. But King Yudhishthira, because of his unflinching devotion to Krishna, could fulfill all his desires successfully by the performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice. So from the description of the Rajasuya sacrifice, such a function appears to be a great ocean of opulent desires. Such an ocean is not possible for an ordinary man to cross. Nevertheless, by the grace of Lord Krishna, Yudhishthira was able to cross it very easily, and thus Yudhishthira became free from all anxieties. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We have one little short episode, and this will complete this entire Leela. When Duryodhana saw that Maharaj Yudhishthira had become very famous after performing the Rajasuya sacrifice and was fully satisfied in every respect, Duryodhana began to burn with the fire of envy, because Duryodhana's mind was always poisonous. For one thing, Duryodhana envied the imperial palace constructed by the demon Mayadanava for the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship and was befitting the position of great princes, kings, or leaders of the demons. In that great palace, the Pandavas lived with their family members, and Queen Draupadi served her 5 husbands very peacefully. And because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by Krishna's thousands of queens. When the queens with their heavy breasts and thin waists moved within the palace, and their ankle bells rang very melodiously with their movement, the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdom of Indra. Because a portion of their breast was sprinkled with saffron powder, the pearl necklaces on their breasts appeared reddish. With their beautiful earrings and flowing hair, the queens appeared very attractive. After looking at such beauties in the palace of King Yudhishthira, Duryodhana was envious. Duryodhana was especially envious and lustful upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi, because Duryodhana had cherished a special attraction from Draupadi from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present along with other princes. Duryodhana had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but Duryodhana had failed to achieve her. Once upon a time, King Yudhisthira was sitting on the golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His 4 brothers and other relatives, as well as Yudhisthira's great well-wisher Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were all present, and the material opulence of Yudhisthira seemed no less than that of Lord Brahma. When Yudhisthira was sitting on the throne, surrounded by his friends, and the reciters were offering prayers to Yudhisthira in the form of nice songs, Duryodhana came to the palace with his younger brothers. Duryodhana was decorated with a helmet and carried a sword in his hand. Duryodhana was always in an envious and angry mood, and therefore on slight provocation, Duryodhana would speak sharply with the doorkeepers, and he became angry. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya Danava, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the tricks would consider water to be land and land to be water. Duryodhana was also illusioned by this craftsmanship, and so when crossing water, thinking it to be land, Duryodhana fell down. When Duryodhana, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. Yudhisthira could understand the feelings of Duryodhana, and Yudhisthira tried to restrain the queens. But Lord Krishna indicated that Yudhisthira should not restrain the queens from enjoying the incident. This is because Krishna desired that Duryodhana be fooled in that way, and that all of them enjoy Duryodhana's foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhana felt insulted, and his bodily hair stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, Duryodhana immediately left the palace, bowing his head. Duryodhana was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhana left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident, and King Yudhisthira also was very sorry. But despite all these occurrences, Krishna was silent. Krishna did not say anything against or in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhana had been put into illusion by the supreme will of Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the enmity between the 2 sects of the Kuru dynasty. And this appeared to be part of Krishna's master plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. And so, King Parikshit had inquired from Shukadeva Goswami why Duryodhana was not satisfied after the termination of the great Rajasuya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Shukadeva Goswami. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namaste Narasimhaya, Praklada Klada Dayane, Hiranya Kashi Purvaksha, Shilatankanakalaye, Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsingo, yato yato yamitato Nrsingha. Bahi Nrsingho Hridaye Nrsingho. Nrsingham ading sharanang prapadye. Tavakara kamala varei nakam adbhuta sringam. Dalita hiranya kashipu tanubringam. Keshavadrita narahadi rupa. Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha, Jaya Jagadisha, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Tat Sat.